The silence in the grand foyer was a weapon, and Clara wielded it with the precision of an assassin. Each tick of the gilded grandfather clock in the hall was a hammer blow against Ethan's composure. She stood with her arms crossed, her posture a perfect imitation of her father's boardroom dominance. Her face, which he had once considered the most beautiful blueprint of all, was now a mask of cold disappointment. "It's over, Ethan," she said. The words were not shouted. They were worse. They were delivered with a calm, clinical finality, as if she were dismissing a housekeeper who had broken a cheap vase. "I can't do this anymore. We can't do this." Ethan said nothing. He simply looked at her, his gaze steady. He had spent the last 3 months learning the geometry of her contempt. He knew the precise angle of her chin when she was about to deliver a verdict, the subtle tightening around her eyes that signaled his latest failure to meet the Prescott family standard. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" she demanded, a flicker of irritation breaking through her composure. His silence was unnerving her. She had expected pleading, perhaps anger. She had not expected this quiet dignity. It felt like an accusation. "What would you like me to say, Clara?" His voice was even, betraying none of the storm within. "I don't know. Something. Anything." She threw her hands up in exasperation. "Look at you, just standing there. This is what I'm talking about. There's no fight in you, no ambition. Since you lost the firm, you've just deflated." He had not lost the firm. He had sold it. He had built Vance Designs from a single drafting table in a cramped apartment into one of the most innovative and sought-after architectural firms in the country. Then, an offer had come from a global conglomerate, an offer so staggering it represented not just financial freedom, but generational security. The only condition was a 90-day non-disclosure agreement of absolute, suffocating silence while the merger was finalized. He was in day 88. "My parents are ashamed," Clara continued, her voice gaining momentum as she found her familiar script. "My friends are asking questions. Marcus is bringing his new girlfriend to the club this weekend, and she's the daughter of a hedge fund manager. And what do I have? A husband who buys his shirts from a department store and spends his days—" "What do you even do all day, Ethan?" He thought of the calls with his wealth management team, the plans for the charitable foundation he was structuring, the preliminary sketches for the public library he had dreamed of designing and funding himself. He had tried to tell her he was working on a new project, something personal, but the words had been waved away as the pathetic fantasies of a broken man. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said, the words tasting like ash. "Feel that way?" she scoffed. "It's not a feeling, Ethan, it's a fact. You're broke. We're broke. My father is still paying the mortgage on this house, a fact he reminds me of daily. He told me to give you an ultimatum. Either you present a viable plan for your financial recovery by the end of the month, or this." She gestured vaguely around the marble-floored foyer, at the life he had unknowingly been renting. "And this is the end of the month," he stated, not as a question. "This is the end," she confirmed. "I've packed a bag for you, just a few things. You can arrange to have the rest of your stuff picked up later. My father has graciously offered to let you stay in the old groundskeeper's cottage at the estate for a week, until you get on your feet." The humiliation was exquisite, a masterpiece of cruelty. The groundskeeper's cottage was a damp, one-room shack at the furthest edge of her father's property, a place they had once joked was haunted. It was a final, crushing statement of his new status. "No, thank you," Ethan said softly. Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Don't be proud, Ethan. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing." He met her gaze, and for the first time, a flicker of something she couldn't decipher passed through his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was pity. "That's where you're wrong, Clara," he said. He reached into the inside pocket of his simple jacket, and his fingers brushed against a cool, metallic cylinder. The fountain pen. He left it there. I have everything I need. He turned, picked up the single, worn leather duffel bag she had packed for him, and walked towards the heavy oak doors. He didn't look back. "That's it?" she called after him, her voice a mixture of shock and fury. "You're just going to walk away? After everything I've done for you? After everything my family has given you?" He paused with his hand on the brass handle. He turned his head slightly. "You've given me nothing, Clara. You merely allowed me to pay for things. There is a difference." And with that, he opened the door and stepped out into the crisp evening air, the lock clicking shut behind him with the finality of a tomb. He stood on the manicured stone pathway, the scent of night-blooming jasmine, a flower he'd planted himself, filling the air. He was, by all appearances, a man with a single bag and the clothes on his back, cast out into the world. He looked at his watch. 10 minutes. That was all the time he had to wait. Hello there. Thank you for joining me for this story. If you're enjoying it so far, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps more than you know. And just for fun, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to Ethan. He thought his world was ending. What he didn't realize was that it was just beginning. The weeks leading up to his expulsion had been a slow, methodical dismantling of his dignity. The insults had started as subtle digs, sharp little barbs disguised as jokes at the Prescott family's Sunday dinners. Richard Prescott, Clara's father, was the conductor of this cruel orchestra. He was a man who had inherited his wealth and spent his life cultivating the belief that it made him a keen judge of character. In his eyes, a man's net worth was the only true measure of his worthiness. Ethan remembered one evening in particular, about a month after he had signed the NDA and begun his period of feigned unemployment. It was his and Clara's 5th wedding anniversary. He had spent a week carefully crafting a gift for her. It wasn't a diamond necklace or a European vacation. He knew the Prescotts would see any such expense as proof of his recklessness. Instead, he had used his architectural skills to design a beautiful, intricate scale model of a dream home for them. A secluded lake house nestled in the mountains, complete with tiny, perfect details. A library with miniature books. A small easel on a balcony overlooking the water. A garden with tiny, individually placed flowers. It was a promise, a physical manifestation of the future he was secretly building for them. He presented it to her over a quiet dinner at home, the kind of evening they hadn't shared in months. For a moment, as she lifted the protective glass cover, he saw a flicker of the woman he had married. Her eyes, wide with genuine wonder, traced the lines of the miniature roof. "Ethan, it's incredible," she whispered, her fingers hovering over a tiny wooden porch swing. Did you make this?" "Every piece," he said, a warmth spreading through his chest. "I remember you saying you always wanted a house by the water, a place to escape." She looked up at him, and for a heart-stopping second, he thought he had broken through. He thought she saw the love, the effort, the future he was offering. But then her phone buzzed on the table beside her. It was a message from her brother Marcus. Her expression shifted, the brief warmth vanishing like a mirage. The mask of Prescott practicality settled back over her features. She put the glass cover back on the model. It's very sweet, Ethan. A lovely little hobby." Hobby. The word hung in the air between them, acrid and dismissive. He had poured over 100 hours into that hobby. It was the blueprint for their life. The next day, she had a lunch date with her father. When she came home, the model had been moved from the dining room table to a dusty corner of his study. Later that week, during the obligatory family dinner, Richard brought it up. "Clara tells me you've taken up arts and crafts, Ethan." He'd boomed across the polished mahogany table, a smirk playing on his lips. "Building dollhouses now, are we? Keeping yourself busy?" Marcus snickered into his wineglass. "Maybe you can sell them online, Ethan. Start a little side hustle. Every penny counts, right?" Ethan felt Clara's hand tense on his knee beneath the table, a silent plea for him to just take it, to not make a scene. He looked at Richard, his expression unreadable. "It was a gift for my wife," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "A gift?" Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "My dear boy, a gift is something with value. A stock portfolio, a title deed. A man in your position should be focused on rebuilding his career, not playing with glue and balsa wood. What are you going to do next? Build her a castle in the sky?" The irony was so thick, Ethan could have choked on it. He was, in fact, building them a castle, not in the sky, but on a foundation of solid gold. But his silence, his inability to defend himself, was taken as an admission of guilt. He was a failure, playing with toys because he couldn't handle the real world. Clara didn't defend him. She just smiled a tight, brittle smile and changed the subject, asking Marcus about his latest polo match. Ethan sat through the rest of the dinner, a ghost at the feast. He ate the perfectly cooked lamb, sipped the vintage Bordeaux he had paid for, and listened to the family that was systematically erasing him. He saw the model house only one more time. He walked into the study a week later to find the cleaning lady, a kind woman named Maria, carefully dusting it. "Mrs. Vance told me I could take this for my granddaughter, Mr. Vance," she said, her eyes apologetic. "If that is okay with you, she loves miniatures." Ethan looked at the intricate model, the symbol of his silent promise, now being given away like a piece of unwanted clutter. He saw the tiny porch swing, the library, the life he had offered. "Of course, Maria," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "Please, I hope she enjoys it." He watched her carry it away and felt as if a part of his own future was being carried out of the house with it. That was the moment he knew. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about his feigned unemployment. Clara had stopped seeing him. All she could see was the reflection of her own family's disappointment. The foundation of their marriage, which he had believed to be built on solid ground, was nothing but sand, and the tide was going out. He had continued to endure, telling himself it was for the promise he'd made, for the life he could give her once the 90 days were up. But that night, as he stood in the empty space where the model house used to be, he began to understand that some structures are not built to last. They are designed to fail from the very beginning. The final dinner, the one that served as the catalyst for his eviction, was a masterclass in psychological warfare. It was held at the Prescott family estate, a sprawling mansion that oozed old money and entitlement. The air itself seemed to judge his comparatively inexpensive suit. Richard had called the dinner under the pretense of a family meeting to discuss the future, a phrase that, in the Prescott lexicon, meant Ethan was about to be placed on trial. Clara had been tense all day, vacillating between moments of cold distance and flashes of nervous affection, as if she were trying to convince herself of a decision she had already made. As they drove to her parents' house in the luxury sedan that Ethan's money had bought, she fussed with his tie. "Try to look positive tonight, Ethan," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Dad is in a mood. Just agree with him. Don't argue." "When have I ever argued, Clara?" he asked gently. Her hand dropped from his tie. "Don't be like that," she snapped. "You know what I mean. Just be agreeable. For me." The dinner began with the usual passive-aggressive pleasantries. Richard dominated the conversation with tales of his latest financial conquests, while Marcus, ever the sycophant, lauded his father's genius. Ethan remained a silent observer, a polite smile fixed on his face, feeling more like an anthropologist studying a strange tribe than a member of the family. The main course arrived, and with it, the main event. "So, Ethan," Richard began, dabbing his lips with a linen napkin, "Clara tells me there's been no progress on the employment front." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered for the benefit of the audience. "I'm exploring several long-term projects," Ethan replied, using the vague, corporate-approved language he had rehearsed. "Things that require a significant planning phase." Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh. Long-term projects? Is that what we're calling it now? Last I heard you were designing dollhouses. That's enough, Marcus, Clara said, though her voice lacked any real conviction. No, let him speak, Richard said, holding up a hand. Honesty is important in a family. The boy has a point. Your projects, Ethan, whatever they may be, are not putting food on the table. My daughter is accustomed to a certain lifestyle. A lifestyle you promised to provide, and a promise on which you have spectacularly failed to deliver. Ethan placed his knife and fork neatly on his plate. He looked from Richard to Marcus, and then finally to his wife. She was staring at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped her wineglass. The silent enabler. The circumstances of my departure from Vance Designs were complex, Ethan said, choosing his words with immense care. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. Ah, yes, the famous details, Richard sneered. Always so secret. It sounds to me like the excuse of a man who was forced out for incompetence and is too proud to admit it. Let me be blunt, Ethan. A man is defined by his ability to provide. Right now, by that definition, you are barely a man at all. The insult was so profound, so nakedly cruel, that the air thickened. Ethan felt a cold, clear anger rise within him, but he mastered it. He would not give them the satisfaction of an outburst. He would not descend to their level. His dignity was the only armor he had left, and he would not shed it. It was then that Marcus played the final card. You know, Dad, he said, leaning forward with a conspiratorial gleam in his eye, I ran into Gregory Dalton at the club today. He was asking after Clara. Clara's head shot up. Gregory Dalton was the heir to a hotel empire, a man known for his flashy cars and his even flashier divorces. He was everything the Prescott family valued, wealthy, connected, and utterly superficial. He's recently single again, Marcus continued, watching Clara's reaction. He's hosting a party on his yacht next month. He made it a point to say that Clara should consider herself personally invited, with or without company. The implication was disgusting, but Richard's eyes lit up. Gregory Dalton, you say? A fine young man, from a good family. Now there's a man with ambition. Ethan looked at Clara, waiting for her to shut it down, to express her outrage at her own brother dangling her like a piece of bait in front of another man. He waited for her to defend their marriage, to defend him. She did nothing. She blushed, a faint, rosy color creeping up her neck, and took a nervous sip of her wine. Oh, Marcus, don't be ridiculous, she murmured, but there was a flattered lilt in her voice. And in that moment, Ethan's heart, which had been slowly fracturing for months, finally broke. It wasn't a loud, violent shatter, but a quiet, clean split. He saw the rest of the evening as if from a great distance. He saw the knowing looks exchanged between father and son. He saw his wife's subtle preening at the mention of a wealthier suitor. He saw the entire ugly architecture of their values. They were not just attacking his finances, they were auctioning off his wife at the dinner table, and she was, on some level, a willing participant. He had been holding on for her, believing that beneath the layers of familial pressure and materialism was the woman he loved. But she was gone. Or worse, perhaps this is who she had been all along. When they got home that night, the silence in the car was absolute. As they walked into the foyer, the same foyer where she would cast him out just days later, she finally spoke. You have to admit, it's an option, she said, her back to him as she set her purse down on the credenza. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. What is an option, Clara? She turned to face him, her expression hard. Don't play dumb, Ethan. A man like Gregory Dalton, he could solve all our problems. He could solve your problems, Ethan corrected softly. We are not the same person. No, she said, her voice dripping with ice. We certainly are not. That was the true end. The thrown-out bag, the cruel words, the click of the lock, those were just formalities. The marriage had died right there, at a dinner table laden with fine food and poisonous words, sacrificed on the altar of status. Now, standing on the curb, with the weight of that final, soul-crushing dinner still heavy on his shoulders, Ethan felt a strange sense of lightness. The performance was over. The 90-day ordeal was nearly at its end. He looked at his watch again. 7 minutes left. 7 minutes until the old life was officially demolished and the new one could begin construction. He spent the next few minutes in a state of suspended animation, the world around him muted and distant. He watched a car drive by, its headlights cutting a brief, bright swath through the twilight. He heard the distant bark of a dog. He felt the rough texture of the leather handle on his duffel bag. This was the quiet before the storm, the moment of absolute stillness before the first tremor of a seismic shift. He began to pack his bag in his mind, not the one Clara had thrown together, but the one he would have packed himself. He would have taken the worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius that his grandfather had given him. He would have taken the framed photo from their honeymoon, the one where Clara was laughing, her head thrown back, a genuine, unforced joy in her eyes. He wondered where that photo was now, probably in a box in the attic, deemed unworthy of display in the new Prescott-approved world. He would have taken the small, simple silver fountain pen. It was in his jacket pocket now, a cool, solid weight against his chest. It was a graduation gift from his first mentor, a brilliant but unassuming architect named Samuel Bell, who had taught him that the integrity of a structure begins with the honesty of its design. The pen was not flashy. It had no jewels, no gold plating. It was a tool, perfectly balanced and designed for one purpose: to create. With that pen, he had sketched his first designs. With that pen, he had signed the contracts that built his firm. And with that pen, 88 days ago, in a silent, wood-paneled boardroom, he had signed the single document that transferred ownership of his life's work for a sum that would have made Richard Prescott's head spin. The pen was a symbol of his journey, a reminder that true value wasn't in the gleam of the exterior, but in the quality of the unseen framework. Clara and her family saw only the simple, unadorned surface. They had no idea of the intricate, powerful mechanism within. They judged the book by its plain cover, never bothering to read the epic written inside. As he stood there, a strange calm settled over him. The anger and hurt were still there, but they were now encased in a shell of cold clarity. He had been mourning a marriage that had been a phantom for years. He had been trying to shore up a foundation that was designed to be unstable. Clara hadn't just married him, she had acquired him, as one might acquire a promising stock. And when the stock appeared to plummet, she divested, cutting her losses without a second thought. It was brutal, but it was, in its own way, simple. He thought of her final words, "You have nothing." He looked down at his hands. They were strong hands, an architect's hands. They knew how to build things that lasted. He had built a company from scratch. He could build a life from scratch. He did not need her, or her father's money, or their suffocating world of appearances. The knowledge was liberating. The humiliation he had endured was not a reflection of his worth, but of their lack of it. They had tried to tear him down, but they had only succeeded in freeing him from the beautiful, hollow prison he had been living in. He heard a faint sound then, a low, powerful hum that grew steadily louder. It was the sound of a finely tuned engine, a sound that was conspicuously out of place on this quiet, suburban street. He didn't need to turn his head. He knew what it was. He looked at his watch. The digital display glowed in the deepening dusk. Right on time. The hum grew into a purr as a vehicle of impossible elegance turned the corner. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, its body a gleaming, liquid black that seemed to drink the last of the evening light. Its headlights cut through the gloom like diamonds. It moved with a silent, majestic grace, utterly alien to the world of minivans and sensible sedans. It slowed, its engine whispering, and came to a perfect, silent stop directly in front of him, its passenger side door aligned precisely with where he stood on the curb. Inside the house, a curtain twitched in the upstairs window. Clara. She would be watching, her mind racing to understand this anomaly. A Rolls-Royce? Here? Now? It didn't compute. It was a variable that did not belong in the equation of his failure. The back window, deeply tinted, glided down with a faint whir. A woman sat in the plush leather interior, her face illuminated by the soft glow of an interior light. She was in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver hair styled in a severe but elegant cut. She wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit. This was Evelyn Reed, the Chief Acquisitions Officer for the global titan, Sterling Thorne. She was the woman who had negotiated the deal for his firm, a formidable, no-nonsense executive with a mind like a steel trap. She offered him a small, professional smile. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice crisp and clear, "I hope I'm not late. The traffic on the interstate was a bit heavier than projected." "You're perfectly on time, Ms. Reed," Ethan replied, his voice calm and steady. "Good," she said, her eyes flicking for a split second to the grand house behind him, then back to his duffel bag. Her expression didn't change, but he saw a flicker of understanding in her gaze. "Our 90 days are officially concluded as of 6 p.m. this evening. The final transfers are complete, and all confidentiality restrictions are lifted. The press release will go out in the morning." Ethan nodded. "Thank you for seeing this through personally." "It was the least I could do," she said. "The board is exceptionally pleased. Vance Designs was the crown jewel of our quarterly acquisitions. Your work is revolutionary." She paused, then gestured to the empty seat beside her. "We have a suite reserved for you at the Grand Heritage until your new residence is ready. Shall we?" From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw the front door of the house swing open. Clara stood there, silhouetted against the light of the foyer, her hands still on the doorknob. Her face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated confusion. Behind her, he could just make out the portly figure of her father, Richard, who must have arrived moments after Ethan had left, no doubt to celebrate the successful expulsion of his worthless son-in-law. Marcus was there too, peering over his father's shoulder, a smug look rapidly dissolving into bewilderment. They were all frozen, staring at the impossible scene unfolding on their doorstep. The discarded husband, the duffel bag, and the $500,000 chariot waiting for him. Ethan turned to face them fully. He didn't smile, he didn't gloat, he simply held their gaze. "Ethan?" Clara's voice was a faint, questioning whisper, carried on the evening breeze. "What is this? Who is this?" Evelyn Reed, a woman who had dismantled corporate empires with a single phone call, looked from Ethan to the trio on the porch. She understood the entire three-act play in a single glance. She pressed a button, and the rear door of the Rolls-Royce swung open with a silent, inviting grace. "My ride, Clara," Ethan said, his voice carrying with perfect clarity across the manicured lawn. "My ride just arrived." He took one last look at the woman he had loved, at the family who had scorned him, and then he turned his back on them, bent down, picked up his bag, and stepped into the waiting car. The door closed behind him, sealing him in a world of quiet leather and polished wood, and shutting out the life that was already beginning to crumble. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was like a sanctuary. The sounds of the outside world vanished, replaced by a tomb-like silence, broken only by the faint hum of the engine and the soft whisper of the climate control. Ethan sank into the plush leather seat, the stress and tension of the last 3 months seeming to melt away from him. He placed his duffel bag on the floor. It looked comically out of place in such opulent surroundings. Evelyn Reed watched him, her expression unreadable for a moment before it softened into something approaching sympathy. "A difficult evening, Mr. Vance?" she asked quietly. "You could say that," Ethan replied, looking out the tinted window. He could see Clara, Richard, and Marcus still standing on the porch, Three statues of disbelief. Clara had taken a hesitant step forward, her hand outstretched as if to call him back. It would appear our timing was rather dramatic, Evelyn noted, a hint of dry humor in her voice. The NDA was a necessary evil, I'm afraid. Secrecy was paramount to prevent a hostile counteroffer from our competitors. I understand the necessity, Ethan said. It just had some unintended consequences. Indeed. She gestured to a small, built-in refrigerator. Water? Or perhaps something stronger? I believe there's a rather respectable single malt in there. Water is fine, thank you, Ethan said. As she retrieved a chilled bottle in a crystal glass, the driver's voice came through the intercom, smooth and discreet. Shall I depart, Ms. Reed? Ethan held up a hand. Just one moment, if you please. He pressed the button to lower his window. The sounds of the world rushed back in, the chirping of crickets, the distant traffic, and Clara's voice, now sharp with panic. Ethan, wait! What is going on? You can't just leave, she cried, hurrying down the stone path toward the car. Her father and brother followed close behind, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Richard, ever the pragmatist, was the first to begin processing the new data. His eyes weren't on Ethan, but on the car. He recognized the model, knew its approximate cost, and understood that people who rode in such vehicles were not broke. His mind was a frantic abacus, recalculating Ethan's worth. Ethan, my boy, hold on a moment, Richard called out, his voice a strained, hearty bellow. There seems to be some misunderstanding here. Ethan looked at them, the three people who had just minutes before discarded him like trash. Now they were scrambling towards him, their faces etched with a desperate need for answers. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely inverted. The quiet satisfaction he felt was profound, but it was not triumphant. It was the calm, clean feeling of a perfectly balanced equation finally being solved. There is no misunderstanding, Richard, Ethan said, his voice even. Clara was very clear. I'm no longer welcome in your family. I'm broke, a failure, a man with no ambition. I believe those were the terms used. Now, let's not be hasty, Richard sputtered, reaching the side of the car. He peered past Ethan, trying to get a look at Evelyn Reed, assessing her importance. We were just concerned, a father's concern for his daughter's welfare. Your concern was noted, Ethan said dryly. He then turned his full attention to Clara, who had stopped a few feet away, her eyes wide and searching. Who is she, Ethan? Clara asked, her voice trembling. What is this about? Did you get a new job? This, Ethan said, gesturing to Evelyn, is Ms. Evelyn Reed. She's the Chief Acquisitions Officer for Sterling Thorne. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Sterling Thorne was a legendary name in their world. They were corporate behemoths, a global conglomerate that bought and sold companies the size of small countries. Richard's jaw went slack. Marcus's face paled. They had extensive real estate holdings and had been trying for years to get a development contract with Sterling Thorne, a goal that had remained frustratingly out of reach. Sterling Thorne? Richard stammered. What business could you possibly have with them? Ethan finally allowed himself a small, cold smile. They just bought my company, Richard. Silence. The crickets seemed to stop chirping. Clara stared at him, her mind refusing to process the words. But you lost the firm, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You said you were forced out. No, Clara, Ethan corrected her gently, as if speaking to a child. You heard that I was forced out. Your father and brother speculated, and you chose to believe them. I never said that. I said I was no longer with Vance Designs, and that I was bound by a confidentiality agreement. There is a difference. He let the words sink in. He saw the frantic reassessment in their eyes, the dawning, sickening realization of the magnitude of their mistake. I sold my firm, Ethan continued, his voice devoid of emotion. I sold it to Sterling Thorne for a price that would allow me to buy this entire street, including your father's house, and turn it into a parking lot if I felt so inclined. The 90-day NDA, the reason for my silence, expired 12 minutes ago. He looked directly at Clara. The entire time you and your family were mocking me, humiliating me, and planning my replacement, I was one of the wealthiest men you had ever met. You just couldn't see it. You don't know how to look. The full, devastating truth finally hit her. Her face crumpled. Ethan, no, she breathed. No, I didn't know. That is the entire point, Ethan said. You didn't know. You didn't trust me. You didn't stand by me. You listened to them, he nodded towards her father and brother, and you judged me on the most superficial basis imaginable. You said I had nothing. But a marriage, Clara, is supposed to be a partnership, in good times and in bad, in wealth and in poverty. You only seem to be interested in the wealth part. He then settled back into his seat, the picture of calm. It was time for the list of grievances. Not for revenge, but for clarity. So they would understand that this was not a sudden event, but the result of a long, painful process. Let me be clear about why this is happening, Ethan said, his voice taking on a new, authoritative tone. This isn't just about tonight. This is about the anniversary gift I poured my heart into, a symbol of our future, which you dismissed as a hobby and gave away to the cleaning lady. Clara flinched as if he had struck her. Maria. She had forgotten all about that. This is about every Sunday dinner where your father and brother used my perceived failure as their personal entertainment, and you sat there in silence, offering me no defense, not once. Richard and Marcus shifted uncomfortably, their arrogance evaporating under the cold light of this new reality. This is about your brother suggesting he could pimp you out to Gregory Dalton at the dinner table, and you being flattered by the attention instead of disgusted by the insult to our marriage. Marcus looked at the ground, his face burning with shame. And this, Ethan said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more weight than ever, is about you, Clara, standing in our foyer an hour ago and telling me that a man like Dalton could solve all our problems. You didn't see a marriage to be saved. You saw a financial problem to be solved. You looked at me, your husband, and you saw a bad investment. He paused, letting the weight of his words crush them. So you divested. You cut your losses. You threw me out with a duffel bag and an offer to stay in the groundskeeper's shack. An act of charity, you called it. He looked at Richard. And you, Richard, you wanted to do business with Sterling Thorne. You've been trying to get a meeting with their real estate division for years. Well, as part of my deal, I now hold a significant advisory role on their board for all future architectural and urban development projects. The very contracts you wanted, they will all have to cross my desk. Richard Prescott, the titan of industry, looked like he was going to be sick. The opportunity he had craved for years had been living in his daughter's house, and he had just finished systematically destroying any chance of acquiring it. Ethan, please, Clara begged, tears now streaming down her face. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I love you. Please don't do this. Ethan looked at her, at the tears that he knew were real, but he also knew what they were for. She was crying for the future she had just lost, not for the man she had never truly seen. You don't love me, Clara, he said, and there was no anger in his voice, only a deep, profound sadness. You love what I could provide, and when you thought I couldn't provide it anymore, the love vanished. That's not love. It's a transaction, and our transaction is now complete. He turned to Evelyn Reed. I'm ready to go now. Evelyn gave a crisp nod to the driver. Let's go. As the window began to glide up, Ethan spoke one last time, his voice calm and final. You wanted a man with ambition, Clara. You just never realized you were married to one. Goodbye. The window sealed shut, cutting off her desperate cry. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb with a silent, powerful grace, leaving the three of them standing in the street, illuminated by the taillights, looking like the stunned, ruined survivors of a shipwreck they had engineered themselves. As the car turned the corner, Ethan didn't look back. The demolition was complete. It was time to start building again. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. For Ethan, it was a period of quiet, methodical reconstruction. The suite at the Grand Heritage was palatial, with sweeping views of the city skyline he knew so well. But he spent little time enjoying the luxury. His days were filled with purpose. He met with his financial advisors, finalizing the structure of the charitable foundation he had long dreamed of. The Bell Vance Foundation, he called it, in honor of his mentor. Its mission would be to fund scholarships for underprivileged architecture students and to finance the design and construction of public spaces, libraries, parks, and community centers in neglected neighborhoods. He spent hours in the hotel's business center, not on a computer, but with a sketchbook and his silver fountain pen, the ideas flowing from him with a clarity and passion he hadn't felt in years. He was designing the foundation's first project, a state-of-the-art public library for the city's working-class East Side, the neighborhood where he had grown up. The design was bold, innovative, and centered on human connection. It was the antithesis of the cold, ostentatious mansions of the Prescott's world. It was a structure with a soul. His new role at Sterling Thorne was less demanding than he had feared. Evelyn Reed had structured it to be purely advisory, a way for the company to retain his creative vision without bogging him down in corporate minutiae. He attended one board meeting via video conference. As he had predicted, a proposal from the Prescott Development Group for a luxury condominium project came across his virtual desk. The design was bland, derivative, and maximized profit at the expense of community space. He reviewed it, wrote a single concise paragraph outlining its architectural and social deficiencies, and recommended its rejection. The board, eager to impress their new star acquisition, rejected it unanimously. For the Prescotts, those same weeks were a slow, agonizing descent into a hell of their own making. The news of Ethan's sale of Vance Designs to Sterling Thorne became the biggest story in the financial press. The figures quoted were astronomical, far exceeding even the most generous rumors. Ethan Vance was not just wealthy, he was a titan, a self-made visionary who had played the long game and won spectacularly. The story painted him as a quiet genius, and in the personal interest sidebars, it mentioned his recent separation from his wife, Clara Prescott. The narrative that quickly formed in their social circle was clear. The materialistic, status-obsessed Prescott family had failed to recognize the diamond in their midst and had foolishly cast him aside just as his true value was revealed. Richard Prescott became a laughingstock in the clubs and boardrooms where he had once been feared. The story of him trying to get a contract from the man his daughter had just thrown out was too delicious a piece of gossip to be ignored. His business partners looked at him with a new, critical eye. If he could make such a colossal misjudgment of character in his own family, what other blind spots did he have? A major investor pulled out of one of his projects, citing a loss of confidence in management. The foundation of Richard's empire, built on the perception of infallibility, began to show cracks. Marcus fared even worse. His sycophantic reputation, once a tolerable annoyance, now seemed pathetic. His friends at the polo club ribbed him mercilessly. "Still think your ex-brother-in-law should sell dollhouses online, Marcus?" They jibe. The story of him trying to set Clara up with Gregory Dalton also made the rounds, painting him as both a fool and a pimp. Dalton himself, not wanting to be associated with such a spectacular social implosion, pointedly ignored Clara at a gallery opening, leaving her utterly humiliated. But the true weight of the consequences fell on Clara. She was trapped in a prison of shame. Her phone, once a constant stream of invitations and gossip, fell silent. Her friends, who lived by the same brutal code of status, quietly distanced themselves from her. She was now associated with failure, the ultimate sin in their world. She had held the winning lottery ticket in her hand and had torn it up because she didn't like the color of the paper. She called Ethan, repeatedly. At first her calls were frantic and demanding, then tearful and pleading, and finally, just desperate. He never answered. He had instructed his new personal assistant to block her number, but she was relentless. She left long, rambling voicemails, messages filled with apologies, recriminations, and pathetic promises to change. "I see it now, Ethan. I see it all," one message wailed. "It was my father. He poisoned my mind. But I love you. I've always loved you. We can fix this. We can go back to how it was." Ethan listened to that particular message in his hotel suite, the city lights twinkling below. He felt a pang of something, but it wasn't love. It was a sad, distant pity for a woman so lost she didn't even know what she was asking for. Go back to how it was? To the silent dinners, the casual cruelty, the slow death of his spirit? Never. After a month, a letter arrived, forwarded from the hotel. It was handwritten on heavy, cream-colored stationery, the Prescott family crest embossed at the top. It was from Clara. He almost threw it away, but something compelled him to open it. The letter was different from the voicemails. The hysteria was gone, replaced by a raw, hollowed-out despair. She didn't make excuses or blame her family. She simply laid out the wreckage of her life. Her father blamed her. Her brother avoided her. Her world had collapsed, and she was alone in the rubble. "I walk through the house we shared," she wrote, "and all I see are ghosts. The ghost of the man I was too blind to see, and the ghost of the woman I might have been if I had listened to my own heart instead of their voices. You said I saw our marriage as a transaction. You were right. I was raised to be an appraiser of men, not a partner to one. I appraised you incorrectly. It is the great, catastrophic error of my life, and I will live with it forever." At the end of the letter were two simple sentences. "I am not asking for your forgiveness, as I have no right to it. I am only asking to see you one last time, to apologize to your face. Then I will never bother you again." Ethan read the letter twice. He saw the hand of a broken woman, someone who had finally been forced to look in the moral mirror and had been shattered by the reflection. The anger he had held on to was gone, replaced by a sense of weary finality. He owed her nothing, but perhaps he owed it to himself, to the man he wanted to be, to close this chapter with dignity rather than silence. He picked up his phone and sent a short, simple text to her number. "The coffee shop on Arlington Street, tomorrow, 2 p.m., 10 minutes. The coffee shop on Arlington was a small, unassuming place, far from the glittering haunts of the Prescotts. It was the place he and Clara had gone on their second date, a lifetime ago. He chose it deliberately. It was a place that belonged to a version of them that had been real, before the money and the status had poisoned everything. He arrived first, taking a small table in the corner. He was dressed simply, in jeans and a dark sweater. There was no outward sign of his immense wealth, save for the quiet confidence in his posture. She arrived exactly at 2 p.m. The woman who walked in was almost unrecognizable. The perfectly coiffed hair was pulled back in a simple, severe ponytail. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a plain black dress. Her face was pale and drawn, without a trace of makeup. The arrogant, glittering queen bee was gone. In her place was a penitent. She saw him and hesitated at the door, as if she might lose her nerve. He gave a slight nod, and she walked slowly to his table, clutching her purse like a shield. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft and hoarse. She didn't sit down. "You said you had something to say," Ethan replied, his tone neutral. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her eyes fixed on a point just over his shoulder. "Not for the money, not for the future I lost, but for you, for what I did to you. The things I said, the things I allowed them to say. It was cruel, and it was unforgivable. I lived in a world where a person's worth was posted on a balance sheet, and I was a loyal citizen of that world. I failed you as a wife, but more than that, I failed as a human being. She finally met his eyes, and he saw the depth of her shame. You are a good man, Ethan. You are kind and patient and brilliant. I had all of that, and I threw it away for a fantasy, for a number in a bank account. There is no excuse. Ethan listened, saying nothing. He had imagined this moment many times. In his angrier fantasies, he had eviscerated her with words. In his more charitable ones, he had offered a cool, distant forgiveness. But now, faced with the reality of her brokenness, he felt neither anger nor the need to absolve her. He just felt a vast, empty space where their life used to be. I accept your apology, Clara, he said, and he meant it. It was for his own peace, not hers. Not because what you did was acceptable, but because I no longer wish to carry the weight of it. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. I know this is pointless to ask, she whispered, but is there any part of you, any chance? No, he said, the word gentle, but utterly immovable. There isn't. You can't unbreak what has been shattered. We can't go back. The people we were on that second date in this very coffee shop, they don't exist anymore. I'm not him, and you are certainly not her. He was not being cruel, he was being honest. It was the kindest thing he could do. To give her false hope would be a new kind of cruelty. The foundation of our marriage, he continued, falling back on the architectural metaphors that shaped his world, was compromised from the start. I thought we were building on bedrock, but we were building on your family's expectations. And a structure built on a faulty foundation is doomed to collapse. It was only a matter of time. She nodded, seeming to understand. She accepted the finality of it. What will you do now? She asked, a genuine, selfless curiosity in her voice for the first time. I'm going to build things, he said simply. Things that last, things with integrity, a library for a start. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. A castle in the sky, she murmured, quoting her father's insult. No, Ethan corrected her. A library on the ground, for everyone. That's the difference. He stood up, signaling the end of their 10 minutes. I wish you peace, Clara. I hope you find a way to build a new life for yourself, on a better foundation. He placed a $20 bill on the table, more than enough for the coffee he hadn't touched, and walked towards the door. Ethan, she called out, her voice stopping him. He turned. I hope you're happy, she said. I truly do. I am, he said, and the surprising thing was, it was the truth. He walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright afternoon sun, leaving the ghosts of the past behind him for good. He felt clean. He felt free. He felt like a man who had finally cleared the site and was ready to look at the blueprints for his own future. Months later, the autumn air was crisp and carried the scent of change. Ethan stood on a dusty lot in the city's east side, the neighborhood of his childhood. Before him, a large banner flapped in the breeze. It read, Future Home of the Belvance Public Library, Breaking Ground, Fall 2024. Around him was a small crowd, city officials, community leaders, and residents of the neighborhood, their faces bright with excitement. Evelyn Reed was there, representing Sterling Thorne's corporate sponsorship, looking as formidable as ever, but with a genuine smile on her face. His team from the new, smaller, more agile architectural studio he had founded was there, young, brilliant designers buzzing with energy. He was holding a silver-plated shovel, ready for the ceremonial first dig. As he looked out at the crowd, at the hopeful faces of the children in the front row, he felt a sense of profound rightness, of a purpose far greater than any balance sheet. This was real. This had integrity. This would last. He thought for a fleeting moment of Clara and her family. He had heard through the grapevine that Richard's company had suffered significant losses and was being forced to restructure. Marcus had taken a lesser role, his reputation in tatters, and Clara had sold the house, their house, and moved into a small, modest apartment downtown. She had enrolled in a university program studying social work. She was, it seemed, trying to build something new after all. He felt no malice towards them, no satisfaction in their downfall. They were simply footnotes in a chapter of his life that was now closed. Their world of gleaming surfaces and hollow cores had no place here, on this patch of earth where something true and solid was about to grow. The mayor finished his speech and called Ethan to the podium. He kept his remarks brief, speaking not of money or deals, but of the power of books, of community, and of creating spaces where every person, regardless of their background, could build their own future. A building is more than just walls and a roof, he concluded, his voice ringing with passion. It is a statement of our values. It is a promise to our children. Today we are not just breaking ground, we are planting a seed of hope. Let's build something beautiful together. The crowd applauded warmly. He stepped down, picked up the shovel, and joined the mayor and other dignitaries. He looked down at the earth, the rich, dark soil. He thought of his mentor, Samuel Bell, and his simple creed. The integrity of a structure begins with the honesty of its design. He had designed his new life with that principle at its core. As he pushed the shovel into the ground, the feeling was not one of ending or of revenge, but of a powerful, joyful beginning. He was not the man who had been thrown out, defined by another's scorn. He was the man who was building a library. He was home. The past was a demolished building, its rubble cleared away. Before him was an empty plot of land, a perfect blueprint, and a future waiting to be built, stronger and more beautiful than anything he had ever designed before. His true worth was never in what he had, but in what he could create, and his greatest work was just getting started. And that's where our story ends for today. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that our true value is never determined by someone else's opinion or their inability to see who we are. It's something that comes from within, from our integrity, our patience, and our character. Ethan's victory wasn't in the money. It was in remaining true to himself when everyone else had lost their way. What did you think of Clara's apology at the end? Do you believe people can truly change after their world comes crashing down? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights are always the best part of these stories. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. Every single like and subscription helps our community grow. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for being a part of this journey. Until next time, remember your worth and keep building on a strong foundation.